The soundscape inside the daily grind was a carefully engineered symphony of success. The aggressive roar of the bean grinder, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the portafilter being cleared, the high-pitched hiss of the steam wand, and the low murmur of million-dollar deals being discussed over lattes. It was the sound of money being caffeinated. The cafe located on the ground floor of Chicago's Sterling Tower was less a coffee shop and more a charging station for the city's financial elite. And Marcus, its new manager, was the obsessive conductor of this symphony. He stood behind the counter, not working but observing his reflection, a crisp, anxious image in the polished chrome of the espresso machine. His shirt was starched, his tie was a perfect dimpled knot, and his ambition was a palpable aura. In his mind, he was already miles away from this place, climbing the corporate ladder at Venticorp, the conglomerate that owned the chain. This cafe was just the first rung. The investors due in less than an hour were his ticket to the next one. "Can you believe this line?" a man in a pinstripe suit muttered to his companion. "I have a 9 a.m. deposition. I don't have time for this." Typical, his companion sighed, checking a gold watch. "I swear this place has gone downhill since the new guy took over." Marcus heard them. He heard everything, and the comments tightened a cold knot of panic in his stomach. The line was indeed too long. The baristas were moving too slowly. He was about to step in when a sound cut through the symphony, a sound of catastrophic failure. It wasn't a loud bang, but a series of sickly electronic pops, followed by the acrid smell of burnt wiring. The lights on the La Marzocco, the cafe's gleaming Italian centerpiece, flickered erratically, and then died. The rhythmic hum of its boiler ceased. An eerie silence descended upon the counter, broken only by the groans of the customers. "Sarah, what is happening?" Marcus demanded, rushing toward his lead barista. "Is anyone on the phone with maintenance?" Sarah, a young woman with tired eyes but capable hands, was already holding her phone to her ear. "They said a technician is on the way. The ETA is 45 minutes, Marcus." 45 minutes, Marcus's voice shot up into a near shriek. The knot in his stomach became a ball of ice. The investors would be here in 50 minutes. That's unacceptable. Do they know who we are? "This is the Sterling Tower flagship. Call them back. Tell them the regional director is here. Lie if you have to. Just get someone here now." His panicked gaze swept the room, searching for something, anything to control. And then it landed on him. The janitor. An old man moving with a slow, frictionless grace near the condiment station. He was wiping down a barely visible spill, his focus absolute. He wore a plain, faded grey work jacket with a circular ghost of a logo on the breast, its original color and design lost to time. Marcus had seen him around, but had never bothered to learn his name. The man was part of the scenery, like the trash cans or the potted plants. Today his quiet diligence felt like an accusation. Marcus strode across the polished floor. "Hey, you with the cart. What's your name?" The old man finished his wipe, folded his cloth neatly, and turned. His eyes were calm, holding a depth that seemed out of place. "Leo." "Leo." "Right," Marcus said the name, already evaporating from his mind. "Well, Leo, while you've been busy admiring your handiwork, my entire business is grinding to a halt. Do you see this?" He gestured wildly at the dead machine and the growing crowd of angry patrons. "This machine is broken. The customers are furious. And you are wiping up a single drop of cream. Do you see the disconnect here? I need you to be part of the solution, not part of the scenery." Leo looked from the sputtering manager to the dark, silent espresso machine. His gaze lingered on it, and for a fleeting second, his placid expression shifted into one of sharp professional assessment. Then he looked back at Marcus. "What would you have me do?" he asked, his voice even and low. The simple direct question caught Marcus off guard and enraged him. "What would I? Are you serious?" He sputtered, his face flushing. He lowered his voice, conscious of the watching eyes. "Don't be insolent. This is a crisis. My crisis. That means it's your crisis. Go to the back. Find a toolbox. See if there's a switch to reset." "Something, don't just stand there looking useless." Leo held Marcus's furious gaze for a long moment. There was no fear in his eyes, no defiance. There was something else, entirely. Something Marcus couldn't begin to decipher. It felt like a profound, ancient patience. Without another word, Leo turned, pushed his cart toward the staff-only corridor, and disappeared from view, his worn grey jacket the last thing to fade into the shadows. Marcus, feeling a fleeting, hollow victory, turned back to face his disintegrating morning. An hour later, a young technician with the bored expression of someone who had seen it all before arrived. He took one look at the dead La Marzocco, walked to an unmarked panel on the wall behind it, and flipped a single tripped circuit breaker. The machine whirred back to life instantly. He handed Marcus an invoice for a $500 emergency call-out fee. The entire ordeal was a monument to Marcus's own ignorance. The investors rescheduled. The email from his regional director, a woman named Ms. Albright, was a masterclass in corporate passive aggression. It contained phrases like, "deeply unfortunate maintaining brand integrity," and "we trust this will be the last such disruption." It was a warning shot, and it left Marcus feeling exposed and furious. He needed to reassert control to prove to the staff and to himself that he was the one in charge. His gaze fell upon Leo, who was silently mopping the floor where the technician had tracked in rainwater. Leo became the nail for Marcus's hammer. The next morning, Marcus waited for the cafe to fill up before he approached Leo. "Your work yesterday was..." "Insufficient," Marcus began, his voice carrying. "You were told to find a solution. You did nothing. The solution was an electrical issue." Leo replied, his voice low, and even not looking up from his task of emptying a trash receptacle. "The solution," Marcus snapped, "is whatever I say it is. And today the solution is a deep clean." He pointed to the pristine white-tiled floor, the grout. "It's a disgrace. I want you on your hands and knees. I want it looking brand new. Use a toothbrush if you have to." Sarah, working the register, flinched. "Marcus, the floor was just steam cleaned last. Was I talking to you?" Sarah. Marcus cut her off, his eyes cold. He turned back to Leo. "Well, get to it." Leo simply nodded, retrieved a bucket and a small stiff brush from his cart, and knelt. The rhythmic, demeaning scrape-scrape of his work became the new uncomfortable undercurrent to the cafe's morning rush. An hour later, Marcus came to inspect. He loomed over the old man. "Is that the best you can do?" he asked, pointing a polished shoe at a perfectly clean line. "I can still see a shadow there. Look. Use more pressure. My grandmother could scrub harder than that." Leo didn't respond. He just shifted his weight and continued to scrub the same spotless tile, his silence a more potent rebuke than any curse. This became the new routine. Marcus would invent pointless, humiliating tasks, and Leo would perform them without complaint. He was tasked with polishing the exterior glass in a freezing downpour and reorganizing the entire basement storage room, a task that took a full day. He became a ghost, a figure of quiet labor who haunted the periphery of the cafe, and his silent compliance seemed to infuriate Marcus even more. But Leo was not just enduring, he was observing. After his shifts in the quiet solitude of the basement utility closet, he would sit on an overturned bucket and write in a small, worn leather notebook. His entries were not complaints, they were data points. OCT 17. Waste report 4.1 nil milk, 28 discarded espresso shots. Cause barista haste due to managerial pressure, non-standardized drink prep. Solution implement visual recipe guides. At station recalibrate grinder every 2 hours. OCT 19. Labor analysis tasked with exterior window cleaning during rain. 1.5 hours non-productive labor. Could have been reassigned to inventory reconciliation. Inefficient management of human capital. The only person who acknowledged his humanity was Sarah. She saw the quiet dignity in the way he worked and the injustice in how he was treated. "Leo, you don't have to do this," she whispered to him one afternoon as he prepared to head outside with a squeegee into the biting wind. "It's freezing out there." He'll forget he even asked in 5 minutes. Leo paused and looked at her, a flicker of warmth in his otherwise placid eyes. "A job is a job, Sarah," he said gently. "The wind doesn't mind." Later that week, she found him in the break room drinking a cup of water. She quietly slid a mug of freshly brewed coffee onto the table in front of him. "Here," she said. "On the house. You've earned it more than anyone here." He looked at the steam rising from the cup, then back at her. "I appreciate the thought more than the coffee, Sarah. Thank you. But water is fine." He gave her a small, genuine smile that seemed to erase some of the weariness from his face. Kindness is better than caffeine. The 2 weeks leading up to the new investor meeting felt like an eternity. The cafe's atmosphere grew toxic. The baristas worked with a tense, brittle energy, constantly looking over their shoulders. The symphony of success was gone, replaced by the grating sounds of anxiety. In the break room, a small television was always on, tuned to a 24-hour news channel. "And forecasters are upgrading the warning for this incoming weather system," the weatherman said, gesturing to a swirling, angry mass of color on the screen. "We are advising residents across the Chicago metropolitan area to prepare for potential power outages as the system is tracking to be one of the most severe this season." Marcus walked past, grabbing a stack of binders. More hype from the weathermen to sell ads. He scoffed, not even glancing at the screen. "Sarah, have these cups been restocked? Yet I want everything perfect for tomorrow." No excuses. No disruptions. The morning of the rescheduled meeting, the sky over Chicago was a bruised, yellowish gray. The air was heavy and wet, clinging to the skin like a damp cloth. Inside the daily grind, Marcus had manufactured an atmosphere of flawless calm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his own gut and in the heavens outside. He had personally polished every surface and straightened every chair. When the investors walked in at 10 o'clock sharp, he greeted them with a smile that felt brittle enough to shatter. Mr. Chen led the group, his calm demeanor a placid sea next to Marcus's frantic energy. His dark, intelligent eyes swept the room, noting the half-empty tables and the nervous tension radiating from the manager. "Mr. Chen, so glad you could make it," Marcus said, his voice a little too loud. "We have our finest single-origin Kenyan blend brewed for you today. The tasting notes are remarkably complex." Mr. Chen offered a thin smile. "Thank you, Marcus. Let's hope the presentation is equally so." Marcus felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple as he led them to their seats. He launched into his rehearsed speech, his hands gesturing at a large screen displaying the Venticorp logo. Outside, the world was darkening. The first fat drops of rain began to splatter against the immense glass facade, looking like thrown pebbles. A low rumble of thunder vibrated through the floor. Despite a minor operational hiccup 2 weeks ago, Marcus said, forcing a laugh, "Our Q3 projections remain incredibly robust, demonstrating significant market resilience." As he spoke, the wind began to howl, rattling the massive panes of glass in their frames. The lights flickered once, twice. As I was saying, resilience is key. A flash of lightning turned the world outside into a negative image, stark white and black. It was followed by a thunderclap so loud and immediate it felt like the sky was being torn in too directly over the Sterling Tower. And with that clap, the world inside the cafe died. The screen went black. The lights vanished. The music, the hum of the refrigerators, the low thrum of the building's ventilation. Everything ceased. The darkness was absolute, a sudden suffocating blanket. It was accompanied by a silence so profound that Marcus could hear his own frantic heartbeat in his ears. "What's going on?" a customer shouted from the darkness. "Is this part of the show?" Sarah's voice cut through the nervous murmurs. "Everyone please stay calm. It's just the storm. The backup power should be on in a moment." Marcus fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. He turned on its flashlight, the beam cutting a weak, pathetic swath through the gloom. "A minor setback, gentlemen, I assure you," he said to the investors who were now just dark, imposing silhouettes. "Our building is state-of-the-art, completely self-sufficient." His words hung in the dead air. Nothing happened. The sleek automated backup generator, the one he had praised in his reports, remained silent. I don't understand." He stammered, his voice losing its forced confidence. He found Miss Albright's number and hit dial. No service. The line was dead. "It was tested last month. It's fully automated. This is impossible." Mr. Chen's voice came from the darkness, calm and measured. "It seems, Marcus, that the impossible has happened." Amidst the rising panic, Leo, who had been methodically collecting trash bins, set the last one down with a soft, deliberate thud. He didn't seem surprised. He didn't seem concerned. He simply stood for a moment, his head tilted, as if listening to the building's silence. Then he began to move with a quiet purpose that was magnetic in the chaos. He walked to his old metal locker in the staff corridor, the sound of its squeaking hinge unnaturally loud. He pulled out his heavy rolled-up canvas tool bag. He brought it to the main counter and unrolled it. Even in the scattered light of cell phone screens, the tools within gleamed with the dull patina of age and care. They were not the tools of a janitor. They were the tools of a specialist. Sarah, who was nearby, stared at him. "Leo, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and confusion. Leo selected a heavy insulated wrench and a multimeter from the kit. He looked at her, and his eyes were completely calm. "The new system is a closed loop, Sarah." He said, his voice steady and clear, a rock in the sea of panic. "It's designed to be seamless, not to be diagnosed. It can't find its own faults." He paused, tucking the multimeter into his jacket pocket. "Some things need to be built to be understood, not just to be used." His words, simple and profound, seemed to silence the immediate area around him. Even Mr. Chen, who had moved closer, fell quiet, listening intently to the old man in the faded work jacket. With his tools in hand, Leo turned and walked toward the unmarked door at the back of the cafe. It led to the basement, a place no one ever went. He opened it without hesitation, revealing a set of steep concrete stairs descending into absolute blackness. He took the first step down and was swallowed by the dark, a lone figure of competence on a mission into the failing heart of the building. The basement was another world, the air thick with the smell of cold concrete and damp earth was a stark contrast to the curated aroma of coffee and pastries above. High on the wall, a single grimy window offered brief, strobing glimpses of the storm-lashed city as lightning spiderwebbed across the sky. In the center of the vast concrete floor sat the new backup generator, a sleek, white, silent tombstone, marking the death of Marcus's ambitions. Leo walked right past it. His destination was in the far corner, shrouded in a heavy dust-caked tarp. He pulled it away with one smooth, practiced motion. Beneath it sat a machine from a bygone era, the Helios S7. It was a behemoth of cast iron and hardened steel painted a faded industrial green. Its face was a beautiful array of heavy-duty switches, analog dials with real needles, and a single intimidatingly large breaker lever. It wasn't designed to be hidden, it was designed to be trusted. Upstairs, the fragile order was collapsing. Phone flashlights cut nervous dancing beams through the oppressive darkness. "I've already left a voicemail for building maintenance," Marcus was saying, his voice thin and reedy as he spoke to the investors. "And the utility company. Someone will be here shortly, I'm sure of it." One of Mr. Chen's associates, a younger man named Franklin, spoke up, his patience clearly exhausted. "Mr. Chen, perhaps we should go. There's nothing more to be seen here." But Mr. Chen didn't move. He stood near the back, his gaze fixed on the open basement door from which a profound silence emanated. "Patience, Franklin," he said, his voice a low murmur. "I find this educational. I'm curious to see how it ends." Sarah, meanwhile, was trying to manage a customer who was demanding a refund. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she explained for the third time. "We can't open the cash drawer without power. The system is entirely digital." Down below, Leo was a study in focused calm. He didn't need a flashlight. His hands, guided by memory, found the latches to a side panel. He swung it open, revealing a guts of the machine, a clean, orderly, and comprehensible world of thick wires and robust relays. His fingers, so slow and methodical when sorting trash, moved with the nimble precision of a concert pianist. He disconnected the failed modern transfer switch, deftly rerouting primary power feeds and bypassing 2 decades of technological progress. He worked not like someone fixing a machine, but like someone waking a sleeping giant. He was reconnecting its iron will to the building's steel veins. When he was done, he placed both hands on the heavy breaker lever. It was cold and solid beneath his palms. He took a single centering breath and threw his entire body into the motion, pulling it down. K-chunk. The sound was a deep, resonant physical thing, a sound of pure mechanics that vibrated up through the soles of everyone's feet on the floor above. A second passed. Nothing. Then a low growl started deep in the belly of the Helios S7. It coughed once, then again, before catching and settling into a powerful, confident roar that filled the basement with the sound of raw, reliable power. Upstairs, a single recessed light flickered on. Then the entire grid surged to life. The refrigerators hummed, the music faded back in, and the La Marzocco chimed its cheerful, 3-note welcome. The cafe was flooded with a warm, unwavering light. The sudden return of power was more shocking than its loss. A collective, stunned silence fell over the room. Marcus, who had been hunched in defeat, snapped his head up, his face a mask of utter disbelief. He scrambled toward the basement door, drawn by the impossible roar from below. Mr. Chen followed his expression, one of deep, intense curiosity. They found Leo standing at the bottom of the stairs, bathed in the light of a single bare bulb, the proud roar of his machine echoing around him. "You," Marcus yelled over the noise. "How? What did you do? The main grid is down." Leo looked up, his face calm. He pointed to the sleek white box in the center of the room. "The new system is too smart to realize it's stupid. The grid is fine. The automated switch failed to transfer the load." "What are you talking about?" Marcus stammered, his mind unable to process the information. Who even are you? Leo didn't answer him directly. He simply reached out and pointed to the polished brass nameplate on the side of the roaring generator. The engraved letters were unmistakable Helios Engineering. Then he tapped the faded circular logo on his own jacket. Mr. Chen stepped forward, moving past Marcus to the top of the stairs, his eyes alight with dawning comprehension. Helios, he said, his voice cutting through the din. They built this tower's core, electrical and mechanical systems 20 years ago. I remember the bid. It was revolutionary for its time. He looked directly at Leo. Leo met his gaze, acknowledging a peer. We built it to last, he said, his voice carrying a note of old pride. Not to be obsolete. Marcus stared, his eyes darting between the name on the generator and the name on the jacket, the two finally clicking together in his brain like the tumblers of a lock. Helios. But you're the janitor. Leo finally turned his full attention to the sputtering manager. He picked up his canvas tool roll, his movements once again slow and deliberate. My job title is what I do, Marcus, he said, his voice quiet but clear. It's not who I am. Here is the continuation. The roar of the Helios S7 from the basement was the sound of a new reality dawning, and it made Marcus Whitman completely irrelevant. He stood at the top of the stairs, mouth agape, a ghost at his own resurrection party. The investors, Mr. Chen and his associate Franklin, walked right past him as if he were a piece of furniture. Their focus was entirely on the old man in the faded grey jacket who was now calmly rolling his specialized tools back into their canvas sheath. The other customers whispered amongst themselves, their gazes shifting from the miraculously restored lights to the janitor, their expressions a cocktail of confusion and awe. Humiliation burned in Marcus's cheeks. He fumbled for his phone, his mind racing to spin the narrative before it crushed him. He retreated to his small glass-walled office and dialed his regional director, Ms. Albright. Marcus, her voice was sharp, cutting through the line. I'm looking at a dozen panicked emails from building tenants and a preliminary alert from the Sterling Towers security chief. What in God's name happened? A minor outage, Ms. Albright. But we had it under control the entire time. Marcus lied, the words tasting like ash. I had our on-site facilities engineer, an older fellow part of the building's legacy team, bring a vintage backup system online. It was a matter of proactive management. Everything is stable now. There was a pause on the other end of the line, pregnant with skepticism. Your facilities engineer is listed on the Venticorp payroll as a janitor, Marcus. His name is Leo Vance, and my report says the investors were present for the entire hiccup. I want a full, honest report on my desk in 1 hour. Do you understand? Yes, Ms. Albright. Marcus whispered, the line going dead. He leaned his head against the cool glass of his office, watching his career curdle in real time. Out on the cafe floor, the whispers were building into a theory. Did you see that the second barista, a young man named Kevin, muttered to Sarah. Old Leo, he fixed the whole building or something. Sarah shook her head, her eyes still wide as she watched Leo. I don't think he's just old Leo, Kev. Did you see his tools? And the way that investor Mr. Chen was looking at him, he wasn't just surprised. He was recognizing something. Her theory was proven correct a moment later. Mr. Chen dismissed his associate with a quiet word, then walked directly to where Leo was fastening the last leather strap on his tool roll. He waited patiently until Leo was finished. Mr. Vance Chen began his voice, respectful. It was the first time anyone had addressed Leo with such formality. I'm assuming that's the name that goes with the company on your jacket. I'd like a word. Not here. He gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. My office is on the 48th floor. Will you join me? Leo looked down at a small smear of grease on his knuckles, then at his janitorial cart. "I have a job to finish, Mr. Chen." "I suspect your old job just became obsolete," Chen countered smoothly, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Your new one, however, may be just beginning." "Please." "I insist." An hour later, Leo sat in a plush leather chair opposite Mr. Chen in a vast corner office overlooking Lake Michigan. He had not changed out of his work clothes. His faded grey jacket seemed both out of place and perfectly at home against the backdrop of polished mahogany and expensive art. He had his small, worn notebook resting on his knee. "That was an impressive display downstairs," Mr. Vance Chen said, leaning forward. "You know that S7 generator better than its own schematics." "I wrote the schematics," Leo replied simply. "But that machine is the least of this building's problems." He opened his notebook, its pages dense with his neat, angular script. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? This cafe?" Leo began his voice. Even and analytical wastes on average 30% of its dairy inventory weekly due to a combination of poor workflow design and non-standardized drink preparation. The HVAC system on floors 10 through 15 is fighting itself a calibration error in the thermostats that costs this building approximately $4,000 a day in wasted electricity. The security camera system has a blind spot in the north loading dock, a result of a software update that wasn't properly integrated with the older hardware. He turned a page. Furthermore, the entire Venticorp business model is predicated on inefficient labor management and planned obsolescence, both in its equipment and its personnel. It's designed for short-term gains, not long-term stability. Mr. Chen leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. He had expected a conversation about engines and wiring. He was getting a comprehensive top-to-bottom analysis of his entire operational investment. The silence in the room stretched, filled only by the distant sound of the city. "My God," Chen finally breathed a look of profound revelation on his face. He stared at the quiet man in the janitor's jacket and the little notebook filled with world-changing secrets. "You haven't been cleaning the floors for the past few years, have you, Mr. Vance?" He leaned forward again, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of discovery. "You've been conducting an audit." Leo looked up from his notes, his gaze direct and unwavering. "I've been observing reality, Mr. Chen, something the people in these offices rarely have time for. Here is the continuation. Mr. Chen left the meeting with Leo Vance, a man possessed by a single overriding question. Why? Why would a genius, a man who could see the foundational flaws in a multi-billion-dollar corporation from the vantage point of a janitor's cart, choose to push a broom for a living? He returned to his office on the 48th floor and summoned his lead analyst. "I want to know everything about Leo Vance." Chen commanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "Helios engineering, his professional history, his personal life, financials, everything. Use whatever resources you need. I want the story, and I want it by the end of the day." The story his team unearthed was not just a professional history. It was a modern Chicago legend. For 2 decades, Helios Engineering, under the visionary leadership of its founder, Leo Vance, had been a titan of architectural innovation. They didn't just build structures, they created self-sufficient ecosystems. Their designs were famous for their durability, their harmony with the environment, and their profound human-centric focus. The Sterling Tower was not just another skyscraper. It was Leo's magnum opus, a symphony in steel and glass. The file was filled with industry awards, glowing articles from architectural digests, and photos of a younger Leo, his face alight with creative energy, standing beside mayors and governors. "So you need to see this," the analyst said, entering Chen's office a few hours later. Leo Vance isn't just an engineer. He founded the company. He was Helios. I suspected as much, Chen murmured, staring out at the city Leo had helped shape. Keep digging. A man like that doesn't just vanish. I want to know why he's cleaning my floors. The next piece of the puzzle was not about steel and concrete, but about coffee and community. The research team discovered that the original name for the daily grind chain was Elena's Hubs. They were founded by Leo's wife, Elena Vance, a vibrant, passionate woman who believed a coffee shop should be the living room of a neighborhood. Her business model was revolutionary for its time, focusing on ethical sourcing, profit sharing with employees, and funding for local arts programs. The cafe in the Sterling Tower was her flagship. Her dream realized a warm heart inside her husband's temple of commerce. Then the story turned. 5 years ago, a single stark police report appeared in the file. A drunk driver on Lakeshore Drive, a fatal collision. Elena Vance pronounced dead at the scene. The articles and records that followed painted a picture of a man hollowed out by grief. Within 6 months of Elena's death, Leo Vance systematically dismantled his life's work. He sold Helios Engineering to a German conglomerate. He sold the controlling interest in Elena's Hubs to Venticorp, who quickly rebranded the chain, stripping it of its community focus and turning it into the cold, efficient profit engine it was today. After the sales were finalized, Leo Vance, one of Chicago's most celebrated innovators, simply disappeared from public life. The final piece came from the legal department, a young lawyer who had spent hours combing through the dense Venticorp acquisition contract. "We found it, sir." The lawyer said, his voice filled with disbelief as he spoke to Chen over the phone. "The sales contract for the cafe chain. There's a clause here, Article 9, Section 4B. I've never seen anything like it." He read it aloud. The language was dry and legalistic, but its meaning was extraordinary. For the remainder of his natural life, Leo Vance retained the right to hold any employment position of his choosing within the physical confines of the Sterling Tower at any pay grade, with cause for dismissal limited to gross criminal negligence. The clause was non-negotiable and had been the final sticking point in the multi-million-dollar deal. Chen hung up the phone, the full picture finally clicking into place. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the memory. Leo hadn't sold his wife's dream. He had sold its shell, but he had contractually refused to abandon its heart. That evening, long after the last customers and executives had gone home, Leo finished his shift. He had spent the afternoon just as he always did, mopping floors and cleaning bathrooms, the quiet rhythm of the work a balm to his busy mind. His meeting with Chen felt like something that had happened to another man. He pushed his cart down the silent staff corridor and stopped in front of a row of lockers. Hanging on the wall, unassuming and largely ignored by the staff, was a small, simple silver frame. Inside it was a photograph of a woman with a brilliant, infectious smile and warm, laughing eyes. It was Eleanor standing proudly in front of the cafe on its opening day. Leo reached out his calloused fingers, gently wiping a speck of dust from the glass that protected her face. It was a simple, tender gesture. A ritual. He wasn't haunting the building, he was guarding it. He was the ghost of a love story, a silent keeper of a promise made to the woman in the frame. Here is the continuation. For 3 days, an uneasy quiet settled over the daily grind. Marcus, clinging to the hope that the storm had passed in more ways than one, tried to reclaim his shattered authority. He barked orders at the baristas, reorganized the pastry display with obsessive precision, and pointedly ignored Leo, treating him once again as an invisible fixture of the cafe. He submitted a heavily doctored report to corporate, a work of fiction that painted him as a decisive leader, and Leo as a simple on-site facilities engineer, executing his manager's brilliant contingency plan. He was beginning to believe his own lies. On Friday morning, he received an email. The subject line was blunt, "Emergency Board Meeting, 11 a.m." He was summoned to the Fanciko regional headquarters on the 55th floor. A cold knot formed in his stomach. This was it. They were either going to fire him or give him a medal based on his report. Given Ms. Albright's tone on the phone, he suspected the former. He spent the next 2 hours preparing his defense, memorizing corporate jargon, and rehearsing lines that deflected all blame. The boardroom was a sterile, intimidating chamber of glass and steel with a panoramic view of the city skyline. Marcus felt like a specimen under a microscope. Ms. Albright sat at the head of the long, polished table, flanked by a half-dozen stone-faced executives. Ms. Albright began, her voice devoid of any warmth. "The board has reviewed your report on Tuesday's incident. There are, let's call them, discrepancies. We'd like you to walk us through the events in your own words." This was his chance. He stood, straightened his tie, and activated his persona of calm competence. "Certainly, Miss Albright. As I stated in my summary, upon facing an unforeseen, city-wide electrical event, my team and I immediately enacted our tiered contingency plan. We leveraged a key legacy asset, our on-site facilities engineer, Mr. Vance, to restore power via a secondary analog backup. It was a textbook case of dynamic, on-the-ground problem-solving." He was just about to elaborate on his leadership when the heavy glass doors at the end of the boardroom swung open. Every head turned. Mr. Chen entered his presence, immediately commanding the room's attention. The executives straightened in their chairs, and walking quietly beside him, wearing the same faded grey work jacket over his simple trousers, was Leo Vance. The air was sucked out of the room. Marcus froze, his blood turning to ice water in his veins. The carefully constructed lies he had been spewing turned to dust in his mouth. Leo didn't look at him. He simply took a place beside Mr. Chen. His calm demeanor, a stark contrast to the shock and confusion on every other face. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Chen said, his voice quiet, but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "Forgive the interruption. I'm afraid there has been a significant change you all need to be made aware of." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, my private equity firm, Chen Capital, has completed the acquisition of a controlling interest in Venticorp." A collective audible gasp went around the table. Ms. Albright's jaw literally dropped. They were no longer just hosting a key investor. They were addressing their new owner. "My first act," Chen continued smoothly, "is to announce a complete strategic restructuring of the company. We are moving away from a model of disposable assets and short-term gains, and towards a future built on sustainable long-term value, both in our infrastructure and, more importantly, in our people." He placed a hand gently on Leo's shoulder. The gesture was both a sign of respect and a transfer of power. "To that end, I am creating a new executive position for the parent company, effective immediately, Chief of Sustainable Innovation. This role will have oversight of all infrastructure capital improvements and cultural development for the entire Venticorp global portfolio." He let the scale of the announcement sink in before delivering the final devastating blow. "And I am honored that the original architect of this building's most reliable systems, Mr. Leo Vance, has agreed to lead this new initiative." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stood there speechless and shaking his prepared remarks and pathetic lies rendered utterly meaningless. The world had just been remade, and he was on the wrong side of creation. The janitor he had humiliated, the ghost he had tried to erase from the picture, had just become one of the most powerful men in the company. He wasn't just Marcus's superior. He was the man who would now be redesigning the very world in which Marcus worked. Leo's eyes scanned the stunned faces in the room, finally landing on Marcus. There was no triumph in his gaze, no malice. There was only a quiet, profound sense of work to be done. The ghost wasn't a king. He was a builder who had just been handed the keys to the entire kingdom. Here is the continuation. The news of the Venticorp takeover and Leo Vance's astonishing appointment swept through the Sterling Tower like a shockwave. The cafe, once Marcus's personal fiefdom, was now abuzz with whispered conversations and speculative theories. Marcus had locked himself in his glass-walled office, not emerging for 2 days. He was a man in purgatory, stripped of his authority, but not yet of his title, waiting for the inevitable summons from human resources. When the email finally came, it wasn't from HR. The sender was Leo Vance, Office of the Chief of Sustainable Innovation. The message was simple: my office. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Marcus spent a sleepless night drafting and deleting resignation letters. He arrived the next morning, dressed not in his usual power suit, but in a simple, funereal, dark sweater. He rode the elevator to the 55th floor, the same floor as the boardroom where his world had been dismantled. He found Leo in a vast, empty corner office, not yet furnished. There was no imposing desk, only a large, collapsible table in the center of the room, already covered in blueprints, schematics, and pages from Leo's worn leather notebook. Leo himself was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city below. He was still wearing his grey work jacket. Marcus stood hesitantly at the door. "Mr. Vance?" "Sir," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "You wanted to see me." Leo turned from the window. "Marcus, come in." Marcus shuffled forward, his hands trembling slightly. "So before you say anything, I wanted to apologize for my behavior over the past few weeks. It was unacceptable. There's no excuse. I was under a lot of pressure and I was wrong. I am truly sorry." Leo listened patiently until he was finished. He gestured to the table. "I'm not interested in your apology, Marcus. Apologies are words. They're about making you feel better about the past. I'm interested in actions. I'm interested in the future." He walked to the table, picked up a thin plastic card, and slid it across the blueprints towards Marcus. It was a standard-issue building access card, the kind issued to custodial and maintenance staff. "This is your new assignment," Leo said, his voice calm and even holding no trace of malice or triumph. "For the next 30 days, you will be working with the night crew. You'll start with waste disposal in the sub-basement, then move to the cleaning crew on the lower floors, then shadow the HVAC maintenance team. You will learn the name of every person on that crew. You will learn what their job entails. You will learn how this building actually breathes." Marcus stared at the card, his mind struggling to comprehend. You're making me a janitor," he stammered. "No," Leo corrected him gently. "I'm giving you an education. You tried to manage a business from a spreadsheet from a penthouse office. You can't lead a team if you don't respect the work they do, and you can't respect the work if you've never been willing to do it yourself." He looked Marcus directly in the eye. "This isn't a punishment. It's your first real lesson in management. Your report is due to me in a month." Later that afternoon, Leo returned to the daily grind. The atmosphere immediately shifted, the baristas falling silent. He walked past the counter and found Sarah in the small break room, hunched over a textbook, a half-finished sketch on a napkin beside it. "Sarah," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her eyes wide. "Mr. Vance, sir. I'm so sorry, I was just on my break." "It's just Leo," he said with a small smile. He pointed to the napkin. "I've seen your sketches. The way you redesign the workflow behind the counter for better efficiency, your ideas for warmer lighting, the community notice board. You have a good eye." Sarah blushed. "Oh, that's nothing. It's just doodling for my design class." "No," Leo said firmly. "It's talent. It's seeing a problem and instinctively looking for a better solution. I am putting together a new team, a special projects group, to begin redesigning all the Venticorp cafes, to bring them back to their original purpose of being community hubs. I'd like you to be on that team." Sarah stared at him, speechless. "It's a paid internship," Leo continued. "Full-time. We'll work around your class schedule. You'll be working with our lead architects. Your first project will be the redesign of this very cafe." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She could only nod, unable to speak. That day, 2 lives were irrevocably changed. One man, stripped of his title, was handed a mop and the beginning of a chance at redemption. One woman who had been overlooked and undervalued was handed a pen and the opportunity to design her own future. Leo Vance hadn't used his new power for revenge. He had used it like a master engineer to tear down a faulty structure and to build up a stronger one in its place. Here is the continuation. Marcus Whitman's first week on the night crew was a descent into a private hell. The Sterling Tower he knew, a gleaming daytime world of ambition and expensive coffee, transformed after midnight into a silent, echoing labyrinth of darkened offices and empty corridors. His world shrank to the squeak of his cart's wheels, the chemical smell of industrial cleaner, and the profound, humbling ache in muscles he didn't know he had. The work was grueling, repetitive, and isolating. The few daytime employees he encountered averted their eyes, their discomfort a fresh wave of humiliation. He was a ghost haunting the ruins of his former life. But by the second week, something began to shift. The initial sting of shame started to fade, replaced by a simple, weary routine. Stripped of his title and ambition, he started to see the building not as a ladder to be climbed, but as a complex living machine tended to by a hidden crew. And for the first time, he started to see the crew themselves. His supervisor was a man named Javier, a senior maintenance worker, with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands, and a dry, surprising wit. "Hey, college boy," Javier said one night, watching Marcus struggle to buff a scuff mark off the lobby floor. "You're fighting it. Let the machine do the work. The secret is in the wrist, not the shoulders." Like this, he took the buffer and effortlessly glided it the scuff mark, vanishing in seconds. Another member of his crew was Maria, a woman in her 60s who had been cleaning the tower for 15 years. She moved with a slow, steady grace and saw everything. She saw the exhaustion etched on Marcus's face, the way he barely ate during their 3 a.m. lunch break. One night she approached him as he sat slumped against a wall. "You look tired, Marcus," she said, her voice soft. She held out a small, steaming thermos. "Here, have some of my coffee. It's better than the expensive stuff upstairs. My daughter sends it to me from her farm in Colombia." Marcus looked at the offered cup. A few weeks ago, he would have recoiled in disgust. Now this small gesture of kindness felt monumental. "Thank you, Maria," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. He took a sip. It was rich, strong, and deeply warming. It tasted like grace. He started listening. He heard Javier complain that his overtime was never approved, even when he stayed late for emergency repairs. He heard Maria talk about the faulty freight elevator that kept getting a software patch instead of the new cable she knew it needed. These weren't just complaints. They were data points about a system that was failing its most essential people. His third week, he was assigned to deep clean the executive offices on the 55th floor, the very boardroom where his career had been executed. It felt like a final cosmic joke. Late at night, while restocking a supply closet, His hand brushed against a loose panel in the back. Behind it, crammed into the wall space, was a cardboard box overflowing with old manila folders. The box was marked in thick black marker shred, Eom, end of month. A flicker of his old, ambitious curiosity sparked. He pulled out a folder. It was full of paper time cards from 2 years ago, the kind with punch-in and punch-out stamps. He recognized Javier's name on one. He remembered Javier's complaint about overtime. On the card, Javier had clearly worked a 10-hour shift, but in the margins, a handwritten note in red ink said adjusted to 8.0 shares per RA. RA were the initials of Ms. Albright, the regional director. Marcus's heart began to pound. He dug deeper. He found dozens more, a systematic pattern of wage theft, with hours shaved off the paychecks of the night crew. He found maintenance logs that detailed serious safety concerns, including the freight elevator's frayed cable, that were marked resolved in printouts. Yet he knew, from talking to Maria, that they hadn't been touched. He found inflated invoices from a cleaning supply company that he now suspected was giving kickbacks to management. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The system wasn't just broken or inefficient, as Leo had said. It was corrupt. It was deliberately and cruelly rigged against the very people who did its hardest work. And he, in his blind hunger to please the people in these very offices, had been their willing, ignorant pawn. His ambition hadn't just made him arrogant, it had made him complicit. He sat on the floor of the supply closet, surrounded by evidence of the rot at the core of the company, the world spinning around him. He could put the files back. He could finish his month of penance, take whatever demotion they offered him, and survive. It was the safe thing to do. Or he could do the right thing. He thought of Javier's easygoing advice. He thought of the taste of Maria's coffee, an offering of simple human decency. With trembling hands, he began to sort through the files, selecting the most damning pieces of evidence. He tucked the papers inside his jacket, his heart pounding, not with fear for his career, but with a new, terrifying and righteous purpose. His redemption wouldn't come from scrubbing floors. It would come from blowing the whistle. And he knew there was only one person in the entire company he could possibly trust. Here is the continuation. Marcus didn't wait. At 6 a.m., as his night shift ended and the first hint of dawn painted the Chicago sky, he rode the elevator up to the 55th floor. He didn't go to Leo's office. He went to the cafe knowing it was the first place Leo visited each morning. He found him there quietly, observing the morning prep, a silent guardian watching over his wife's legacy. Mr. Vance, Marcus said, his voice steady. "Can I speak with you?" "Not here. In the basement?" Leo looked at him, his gaze searching Marcus's face. He saw no fear, no duplicity. He saw a man with the weight of a heavy truth on his shoulders. He simply nodded. They descended into the concrete heart of the building, the air still humming, with the steady, powerful roar of the Helios S7. They didn't speak until they were standing beside the old generator, a monument to integrity in the building's otherwise compromised soul. Marcus carefully laid the box of documents on a dusty workbench. "I found these in the executive supply closet on the 55th floor." Marcus began, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. They were going to shred them at the end of the month. He opened a folder and laid out one of Javier's falsified time cards. "It's all here. Wage theft. Javier's overtime systematically erased by Ms. Albright's office. Unsafe conditions. Maria's been reporting that frayed freight elevator cable for 3 years. They just keep marking it resolved in the digital logs." He looked up from the papers, his eyes burning with a righteous anger. "You were right that the system was inefficient. But it's worse than that. It's predatory. They're not just poor managers, they're thieves, and they're putting people's lives at risk. Leo picked up a maintenance log, his face grim. He read through it, his engineering mind instantly seeing the pattern of deliberate neglect. He looked at Marcus, and for the first time, he saw not a disgraced manager, but an ally. I saw the symptoms, Leo said, his voice low and hard. The waste, the low morale, the equipment failures. You found the disease? What do we do? Marcus asked. It was the first time he had ever used the word we, and truly meant it. We do what builders do, Leo replied, gathering the evidence. We tear down the rotten foundation and build something new. Something that will last. That afternoon, Mr. Chen and the new board were summoned to another emergency meeting. This time, when Marcus Whitman entered the boardroom, he did so not as a defendant, but as a key witness. He wore his simple, clean maintenance uniform, a badge of his newfound perspective. He stood at the head of the table, and with Leo by his side, he told the truth. He didn't use corporate jargon. He used names. He told Javier's story. He told Maria's story. He laid out the paper evidence, contrasting it with the lies in the company's digital records. He spoke with a clarity and passion that stunned the room into silence. He wasn't just presenting data. He was giving testimony for the invisible people who kept the company running. When he finished, the consequences were swift and absolute. Mr. Chen, his face like stone, made a single phone call. The entire regional management team, including Miss Albright, was suspended, pending a full criminal investigation. A team of independent auditors was dispatched to Venticorp headquarters that same day. But Leo didn't just want to punish the guilty. He wanted to heal the system. He stepped forward and unrolled a set of architectural plans on the boardroom table. This corruption, Leo announced, is a symptom of a corporate culture that treats human beings as disposable assets. That ends today. He looked around the room, his voice filled with a quiet, powerful conviction. We are implementing a new company-wide charter. We're calling it the Elena Partnership Program, named for my late wife, who believed a business should serve its community and its employees, not just its shareholders. He outlined the program's core tenets, a new, significantly higher living wage for all employees, a comprehensive benefits package that included educational grants and childcare stipends, and most importantly, a profit-sharing plan where 10% of each store's quarterly profits would be distributed directly to its employees. The Sterling Tower Cafe, he announced, would be the pilot location for the program, with its redesign led by Sarah to begin immediately. Finally, Leo turned to Marcus. The Elena program needs leaders who understand this company from every angle, from the spreadsheets on this floor to the boiler in the basement. He slid a new crisp name tag across the polished table. It read, Marcus Whitman, Regional Manager, Operations Partner, Integration. Your new job, Marcus Leo said, is to oversee the rollout of this program, to make sure it works, to make sure the Javiers and Morias of this company are heard and respected. Marcus picked up the name tag. It wasn't a reward. It was a responsibility. It was a chance to build something better. And as he clipped it to his uniform, he felt not the hollow pride of his old title, but the solid weight of a purpose he had finally, truly earned. Here is the final part of the story. 6 months later, the space on the ground floor of the Sterling Tower was unrecognizable. The cold minimalist sign for The Daily Grind was gone, replaced by warm hand-painted lettering on the glass door that read, Elena's Hub. Inside, the symphony of success had been replaced by the music of community. The air was filled with the rich scent of ethically sourced coffee, the murmur of genuine conversation, and the laughter of people who felt welcome. The walls, once sterile and bare, were now covered in art from local students. A large corkboard by the door was overflowing with community notices, event flyers, and thank you notes. The cafe was thriving, not just because it served good coffee, but because it served a purpose. Sarah, no longer in a barista's apron, moved through the space with the easy confidence of a project manager. Her sketches, once confined to napkins, were now the living blueprint for the warm lighting, the comfortable varied seating, and the impossibly efficient workflow behind the counter. She was explaining the new profit-sharing chart to a new hire, her voice filled with a pride that was once just a distant dream. Marcus Whitman sat at a small table by the window nursing a cup of water. He looked different. The anxious, haunted expression was gone, replaced by a calm, steady gaze. He wore a simple, well-tailored suit, but he wore it with the humility of a man who knew what it felt like to clean the floors in it. He greeted the baristas by name, asking about their families, his interest genuine. He had just finished a tour of the regional cafes, not as a critic, but as a partner, ensuring the principles of the Elena program were being upheld. His redemption was quiet, earned not in a boardroom, but in hundreds of small, respectful conversations with the people he now truly served. But Leo Vance was not in the cafe, nor was he in his executive office on the 55th floor, which he rarely used. He was in the basement. The air still hummed with the steady, reassuring roar of the Helios S7. Standing beside the old generator with Leo was a bright-eyed teenager, a young woman named Maya, an engineering student from a low-income neighborhood who was the first recipient of the Elena Grant for Young Innovators. Leo, still in his simple trousers and the same faded gray work jacket, was showing her the internal workings of the machine. "See this relay," Leo said, pointing with one of his specialized tools. "It's electromechanical. You can see it move. You can hear it click. You can understand it. It was built to have a relationship with the person maintaining it." He looked at her, his eyes full of a teacher's passion. Never design something you can't explain to a curious mind. The best systems aren't black boxes. They're open books. He held out one of his old worn wrenches to her. "Here, your turn." As Maya reached for the tool, her hand trembling slightly with reverence, Leo looked up. Marcus was standing in the doorway, simply watching. He had come down to the basement, to the place where his old life had ended and his new one had begun. He and Leo looked at each other across the humming space. No words were exchanged. None were needed. It was a silent acknowledgement of a shared journey, of a broken thing made whole. Leo turned back to his student, a quiet smile on his face. He had lost his company. He had lost his wife. But here, in the thrumming heart of the building, he had created, surrounded by the legacy of the woman he had loved. He had found his purpose once more. He wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a janitor. He was a builder. And now he was building the next generation. His honor was not restored in a title or a stock price, but in the quiet hum of a well-tended machine and the bright, hopeful eyes of the future. Have you ever been underestimated? Where are you listening to this story from? We love to hear from our listeners, so please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that matter.